Welcome back to the Student Hub Lab, proud in 50 event from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at the Open University. Well, in this session, we take a look at the past and the future of arts and social sciences. And I am joined by three colleagues here. So we have Naomi Barker from music, we have Graham Harvey from religious studies, and we have George Ravel from geography. And we're all going to look at the different ways in which some of our discipline areas, methods and ideas have worked in the past and how they might work in the future. And you've all been involved in various exciting different ways, very innovative ways indeed. So Naomi, I can see here that we have some fabulous props. So I'm going to come to you first. Music. I mean, music, we often think about, one, at the Open University don't teach music, but two, you're doing it in such an innovative way and something that lends itself so well to distance learning. Tell us more.
Indeed. Well, you've got in here a number of items that we've used in the past for teaching music. So packs of CDs, and then we had LPs before that. So very large packs of student material were sent out. And of course, we did our work on pencil and paper.
On manuscripts.
On manuscript paper. And these days we are working with music software. We allow our students to access the music online, just in the same way as at home you might listen to music by streaming rather than putting on a record like we used to, or even putting on the radio. You just stream when you wanted to. So for our new modules, we've got a seamless way of listening to music, which kind of mimics how we would listen to music in our own lives by allowing students to download music from the website or to listen while they're studying on screen. So our new Level 1 module, Discovering the Arts and Humanities, has got something we've not tried before, and it's a brand new way. We're offering students different paths through music, looking at the stuff on screen, online, and listening simultaneously, or having a choice to read the book and then listen to the audios from downloads. So that's a brand new way forward compared to what we used to have with the old study packs.
Now, some people who really like records might argue that they produce a very different sort of sound quality than something online. And what you're doing is you're really breaking apart some of the way in which we look at music in an almost scientific way.
Indeed. If you're listening online, you also have the opportunity to use other more technical ways of analysing music, for example. So our Technology of Music course allows you to use software to analyse music in a different way, which you couldn't do from a record. And yes, some people might say a record gives better sound quality, but it doesn't stop you from having the choice to listen to it in different ways. And I think just because music has changed, the way we use music has changed, everybody accesses it in different ways, so we have to offer different ways of studying it as well.
It seems like so many of the sort of discipline areas that were quite defined at one point have really merged. We're often taking different methods and ideas from different genres and including them in our own work. And music strikes me as something that is very interdisciplinary in the sense of combining a lot of that technological aspect with the aesthetics.
Very much so. I think one of the things that I find really exciting about studying music, and more so now as we move forward, it's changing all the time. We're no longer just confined to sort of studying the history of music or the theory of music. We're studying a whole range of different types of music from other parts of the world, from different cultures. We're studying popular music, we're studying jazz, and we're looking at things like psychology. There are all kinds of elements that are coming together. And it's just a really exciting time for music to be able to inform other disciplines and other disciplines to be able to inform music.
And technology and sharing things globally and immediately also just gives us so much more access to things. I'd like to talk about this more in detail, but I just want to include our other guests as well, because George, you're doing something very, very interesting with technology, virtual field work.
Yes, in one sense, our kind of problem is a bit like yours in a sense, insofar as one of the things we were talking about is how you bring people together practicing music in different places at the same time, and now technology can do that, and we can use setups like this, and somebody can play in one city and somebody else can play in another city and they can play together. So that creating a kind of virtual space, if you like, is kind of really important. And geography has that issue too, insofar as we need to take people to places. So we call it field work. We need to take people to places, and they need to be able to interact with those places and do research and ask questions and measure things.
So how do they do that?
That's really difficult. Now, there are a variety of ways of doing it. So, I mean, other colleagues are creating whole virtual environments which you immerse yourself in, which are created entirely digitally. Some other colleagues are creating links with students in other places so that you can talk to Skype to them and find out what's going off in South Africa or whatever it is. What we're doing is we're kind of creating a virtual research desk, which is, so on the one hand, it sounds much less exciting than some of these other more very whizzo technical things. But the idea is that by bringing a series of digitized materials together, and they can include maps, they can include field notes, which are written, a bit like that, or it could be still photographs, bits of video, interviews, but rough cuts of everything. So that somebody sits with all this material on their desk, on a research desk, and then has a question, how do I answer this? So it becomes like a kind of a set of clues from which you have to pick and choose all the information. And we have this system of immersing people in locations by using something very simple, the 360-degree photo bubble. So you can go in and you can look around and feel what the place looks like, and then you have all these materials in front of you to answer the question. So it's doing two things. It's kind of taking people to a place, but it's also helping to develop a set of research skills. Often in the past, one criticism of our kind of teaching is we over-package things. Everything is cut down to the last letter and the last paragraph. Everything's very, very well edited. If we edit things a little bit less well, then our students have to learn how to do some of that editing for themselves. And that's a really important research skill, and that's one of the things we want to teach by using this kind of virtual fieldwork through the research desk.
And often, I mean, some of these technologies, you know, it used to be the case where we would think about having something that could be done online. It would almost be an inferior alternative. But yet so much, particularly in music, cannot be done in any other way other than through online. And often we can create those spaces in ways that couldn't be done in a practical sense. You couldn't just fly over to South Africa, for example. The internet and digital technologies have enabled us practically and physically to be able to make these connections that we couldn't make before.
Absolutely. I mean, both we in geography and other colleagues in environmental sciences and elsewhere have been very good at pioneering citizen science technologies where people come together and everybody collects 3, 4, 5 pieces of evidence, puts it in a big database, and if everybody collects 5 pieces of evidence and there's, you know, 1,000 people collecting evidence, you've got 5,000 pieces of evidence, and that is a lot of material. And by having a lot of material, that helps in order to create some kind of representational quality to it. So not everybody has to collect stuff which is perfect, but if everybody collects something, by adding it all together in the big pot, you get some very, very useful data. So those kind of techniques are also important to what we're trying to do. We have done this before in geography environment, but that was a few years ago, and I know environmental sciences have worked more recently with it. When we tried it last, our digital systems were not as sophisticated as they are today. So we're moving back into this territory in order that our students can do research and share their findings, and everybody benefits.
It's this whole idea of back and forwards, and I want to ask you, Graham, as well, just being reminiscent that, for example, religious studies have these amazing virtual spaces. You can go into a religious site and do a 360-degree, but I'm sure you would argue that also that immersive experience, actually flying somewhere and being in that situation, gives you a whole different quality of research. So how is religious studies working with this whole idea of the past and the future in terms of these technologies?
Thanks. So yeah, so we've done some similar things. We once again and still send people online to look at various places and visit some of these virtual spaces too. But one of the things we do at the beginning of our second level module, A227, Exploring Religion. So just the name Exploring Religion suggests you ought to be able to go and explore. Well, our argument is religion happens everywhere, happens near you. So we send students out right at the beginning of the module to go and take a picture of something that might be religion, and I emphasise might be. We get them to define whether they think it is or isn't, whether it might be for somebody else but not them. So from street names, lots of streets called St Mary's Road. It could be they go and take a picture of a mosque, temple, church, synagogue, grove, some other sacred place. And it could be they go to a football ground and argue that this, for some people, is at least like religion. So again, we shift from a time when perhaps we would have sent them pictures of our own and said, think about what this might mean, to getting students now enabled to share their own pictures and discuss them with each other in a much more collaborative way, which we think is very exciting. And later in the module, we get them to do a sound recording as well, and think about the richer senses of religion as people live it and do it. So what does religion sound like? Sort of help push that from the very visual sense to the other ways in which religion is experienced and performed.
And you've also been involved, both of you, on making some of these massive open online courses, these MOOCs, which anybody can access and which share knowledge very generally. Again, part of the Open University's mission to be open to people, places and ideas and disseminate a lot of this knowledge is very important to us.
Yes, I wrote a MOOC 4 years ago now for our FutureLearn platform, and it's reached over 25,000 students just in 2 or 3 years. So the reach is enormous, and the fact that it's open to everybody is very appealing to me. And I'm currently involved in a project which is devising a MOOC on conducting. Now, conducting is a very physical thing. You have an orchestra in front of you or a band in front of you. So developing new technologies to be able to create something which helps students to learn a physical skill is very exciting, and it's great to be part of this partnership, which is being funded by an ERASMUS fund, and it's big conservatoires of music that are developing the conducting side, and we're helping with the teaching side, and it's going to be a really fantastic project, hopefully going live in about 3 years' time, which would be great.
You've been working on a MOOC also.
Yeah, we're currently polishing the MOOC on religious diversity, which will go live in September. It's kind of aimed at people who need to deal with the diversity of religions in the contemporary world, in which religion sometimes is presented as a problem or causes problems. So from simple things like whether people are allowed to wear religious jewellery at work to identify as religion, to questions about the religious or other origins of violence, what motivates people to become activists of various kinds, from eco-activists to what we might call terrorists or extremists, problem words. So we're looking at enabling people to think about, to ask questions about what motivates people, what they're looking at when they see religious displays, how they might think differently about people's choices. Are they choosing to wear those costumes, or are they forced to? So, but yeah, basically looking at diversity issues and thinking about religion for professionals in workplaces and so on.
Yeah. No, excellent. And of course, being able to have those accessible platforms is really, really important to people. But also, some of the things that we're all doing here is collaborating a lot more. So, you know, I mean, some of the work that you're doing, for example, with Trinity Laban, you know, for students making music and things, those are very innovative ideas.
Yes, that's something we never used to do in the past, was to offer any way for music students to actually physically play music together. So we have a collaborative partnership with Trinity Laban, and our third level course is a partnership course, and students can get together, and they have a residential school, and they all get together and actually play music together and then reflect on their activities. So that's fantastic for our students, and we hope that we'll be able to develop more in the future, but it's certainly something that didn't happen in the past.
No, absolutely. And of course, tackling some of these wider issues. I mean, George, some of these concerns are really important. Climate change, for example, is something that, you know, is so important to us on a global scale.
Indeed so, and I think one of the things that come out of the discussion today is just how much every discipline has to be interdisciplinary now. And we're recognising that so many of the issues we face are complex in all sorts of ways. So issues in music are about psychology, they're about the technical ability, they're about all sorts of things put together, and we need to recognise that. Similarly, similarly where religious studies are concerned, and issues in religious studies impact on my world in terms of the environment and how we understand environments and the relationship between people and nature. So I think that sense, the things that help us collaborate together and come together, and digital technology in its best, at its best, can help us do that, is really, really important in tackling these kind of issues like climate change or a whole range of other things that we face at the moment.
And issues as well, bringing various global voices in religious studies is important.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in the way in which indigenous people, so Native Americans, Maori, Sami people in Arctic Norway, are confronted by the immediate effects of climate change. This is not something which is coming, it's happening now. The Arctic is warmer, salmon and reindeer are immediately affected, humans are affected, and so I've been looking at the way in which some indigenous people are using resources from their traditional cultures, from their ancestry that they've inherited, adapting them to now to create some sort of resilience, cultural resilience at least, to deal with these changes. I mean, some of these people, for example, a lot of Native Americans say, we have already been through climate change. We were shifted by colonial powers from forest zones or wet zones, lakelands, into the arid zones of Oklahoma. We knew no plants, no animals there. This is what it means to deal with climate change. You're all going to face this. Let's think about how we can face the future with these kind of resources. How do we create a more respectful world? So there's some very exciting things happening in those communities.
I'm just going to say that I think it's really important to say something like climate change, which appears to be an issue for contemporary science. It makes such a lot of sense to think about how people have adapted to climate change in the past, either on the Great Plains of the US or indigenous people in Australia, a range of locations, and to think about how their lives had to change and to take account of changing circumstances, how we can learn from that. So that sense of deeper history and culture is really important to contemporary science. And that's something which geography and the kind of disciplines we're talking about here can help bring together.
And again, showing how those disciplines are working together, that you can, have religious studies, which is including so much more than just religious studies, including anthropology, likewise with geography.
Indeed so. So, for instance, we have a section in one of our modules, not long created, DD213, which is about Indigenous Australia and the use of fire stick farming in contemporary environmental management. However, the backstory to that is that Indigenous Australians have had to cope with changing environmental conditions for many thousands of years. So whereas we may have had a naive view of them as unchanging over a long period of time, it's now clear that we can see they've been adapting and adaptable and open to change over a long period of time, which makes the notion of traditional societies seem totally ridiculous.
So things are moving more to an interdisciplinary focus now, I guess, where we're taking a lot of these ideas and including them in different ways. Can we then take a look at the future and think about how things might look down the road and perhaps an indication of some trends that we're picking up on now that may become much more important?
Well, so although we're emphasising interdisciplinary, we're also looking back at our own disciplines and thinking, how might we do this differently? So although we're worrying about place and the sound of music and so on, so it's based on the song now, we're also thinking about how we ourselves define religions, and we're thinking about, for example, the materiality of religion and the performance of religion, that people do religion as bodies with objects which make a difference to the way that religion is performed. It's not all about ideas. So yeah, we've learned from other disciplines, but we're also really engaging with those sort of central ideas, and we're making that possible for our students right from the beginning, rather than setting them out on a traditional notion of religion as a set of beliefs. Let's start straight away with religion as something people do, as something that involves material culture, things people wear, places people go, and so on. and then we layer that as we go on.
I think it's very interesting you talk about religion as something people do, because music is something that people do. And if you go back 400 years, before people got involved with notation and analysis and theory, it was something people did. And I think for me there's a very interesting parallel with the digital world, that it's something people do. You engage with it by listening to it, by getting involved without having to sit down with a score and working out what the dots on the page mean. So I think in some ways we've got an interesting backward glance at how things used to be, but actually it's also how things have been alongside and running parallel and will carry on being. That music is this thing that we do and is very much part of our lives.
Well, we asked people at home how they listen to music, and the results are that 33% said online streaming, 33% said CD, and then the rest were either live playing music or stored MP3 or playlists. So again, I would have expected streaming to perhaps take slight priority over CDs, but again, maybe those CDs are in the car often, and it's about these places again that people can access.
I think it's about being able to listen to your music in a whole variety of different ways, and I think that's what the technology is opening up for us. We're not confined to being in a certain place at a certain time to be able to access the music. We can just do it where we want to.
Take a quick trip to HJ and Damon and see how everyone is at home.
We're having a good discussion about what we expect for the future of learning and technology as well. So maybe instead of Adobe Connect, using VR to join our tutorials in the future. And Damon just said as well about holograms in lectures.
Yeah, there's, as far as I understand it, there's a couple of universities in the United States that are starting to use holograms to project their lectures. That might be a little bit further down the line for us, but...
But we've got all these great links that Damon has been posting in the chat as well, of the 360-degree exploration of places in London. So if there's any resources that you found on OpenOS or anything else that you've encountered, or anything on your module that you think is really innovative or really caught your attention, we'd love you to let us know in the chat as well.
So George, how then might for geography, holograms, are they in the pipeline, or what sort of how are things going to be expanding, and what particular trends do you notice apart from climate change?
Right, minor diversion. As we were talking there, I was just thinking of how we might have avatars for lecturers, and you choose your own avatar for a lecturer. I'm just thinking about the horrible prospect for that, but no, I will put that idea to one side. I think, and as somebody who's interested in geography and heritage and visiting landscapes, I think augmented reality is going to be the way forward. So that when...
Can you just explain the difference between augmented and virtual reality?
So augmented is where one is actually in the place and one's view of the place is augmented by other things. So I might wear goggles, okay? And I'm looking at, I have a landscape in front of me. And as I scan that landscape, things will be in that landscape which will tell me about it. Or it will recreate an old field system, or show me where certain things happened, or there will be biographies of people who lived in particular houses, or things about the geology, so that as I walk or look at that landscape, I'm informed by extra information. It's augmented. I'm getting additional information, but I'm actually there, physically present too.
So you might be able to walk through a field and see an ancient monument or something,
Yes.
as it might have been then.
Yes, I think that's a really exciting set of possibilities. And just imagine being able to go on a walk, a guided walk, which takes you to a particular city, and as one looks around the city, you can see how that might have been, a street might have been 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, or look and see the infrastructure under the pavement, or see a breakdown of the social makeup of particular districts, etc. There's all sorts of really fascinating, exciting possibilities with augmented reality, and that for me, as a geographer with my feet on the ground, because that's where we geographers are, that is, I think, probably a very exciting set of possibilities.
So why is that then for you more exciting than learning stuff through a book, for example? Because knowledge, I mean, it's a different way of learning, isn't it?
It
And
is.
sometimes technology can be so buzzy and we can think, oh yeah, that's great, I'm going to sort of include this, that or the other in something. But at the OU, we're always going back to, you know, what is the basis of this? So why would something like that be of interest?
Well, I don't think it does replace the book. And this may or may not be on message for the Open University, but my feeling is, and certainly our experience in developing new modules, is that we have a book or two books, and they have chapters which give interesting information, they give basic information, and then our teaching, a lot of our teaching is then done through the study guides, the online study guides. So you take ideas from the written material, and then students have a chance to practice it, experience it in different locations, and work with it in different contexts online. So it really consolidates that learning. So the books, the reading on the paper and the working through virtual materials and digital materials are not antithetical, they work together.
Because so much, I think, of what students think knowledge is something in a book. It's those theories and ideas. And very often we're sort of saying, actually, it's the skills, it's the ability to think, it's not remembering
It's putting them
something.
together. It's that I think is key. And again, this is a geographer's point of view, because again, geographers like real places and real things. But being able to be in a specific location and think that place through a set of ideas or concepts or theories to help me understand what I'm looking at and what's happening around me, that's what brings the world to life. And it's that bringing the world to life that really gets me going.
I think that relates very much to music as well, because you're learning by doing. And I think learning by doing is such an important process. It's not just learning by reading, but actually embodying it yourself. So you actually got to do it. And I love your idea of augmented reality. You're going through a cityscape and hearing sounds as well.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Indeed, yes.
And music in a space.
And could you imagine putting goggles on and having something that you'd made on one of these modules played to a live audience and seeing their reaction to it?
That would be brilliant. Going
And the
into
applause.
an old space with all the geography recreated with the sounds, and it would be fantastic.
I could just imagine going to a religious space and putting on a set of goggles and being able to experience different forms of religious practice that maybe date back 1,000 years.
We have a colleague working on that in a number of British cathedrals at the moment, working with those cathedral teams to look at what people did when the cathedral was first built, what the ritual would have been like, how it sounded. Perhaps one day we'll get how it smelled and all the rest of things with the incense and so on. And then the layering as the cathedral usage changed, as the basic ceremonies changed. So yeah, we're doing that now, and we'll make some of those resources available to students as they're available to visitors to those places. And we hope it'll catch on and be a valuable resource for everybody. So,
Yeah.
very much. But I just want to go back to the book thing. So our job isn't just to present a load of facts, which can be easily done in a book, but it is, as you suggested, to also present, to get people to learn skills and practice skills, and therefore, you know, somehow we built that into our modules now much more than perhaps we once did, so that students are learning not just a set of facts that they might one day win a pub quiz with, you know, 5 things that Muslims do, or 5 facts about South Africa, but skills for finding out information themselves, skills for communicating those things, and building those right into the modules makes them much more exciting than perhaps just the book.
Absolutely. I mean, the big buzz thing, and I know, George, you'd mentioned it the other day in passing, is these employability skills and these digital skills that increasingly we're incorporating that may sometimes be a little bit hidden to students, especially when they're studying something they're very passionate about.
That's very true, and I think it's up to us to explain as we go along why people are learning, why we want to get people to do something. Why do we want people to contribute to a forum? It's not just because the forum's there, it's for all sorts of reasons. A, because people get information from another, but secondly because the very act of communicating on that forum is a transferable skill. If I'm in a workplace, I have to talk to my colleagues. And I have to communicate with them. I might be communicating with them online. If I'm a specialist in something, I may have to tell them about something specialist to my knowledge in words which are for a layperson. all that sense of being able to communicate, we can work through with these kind of skills and exercises, and they're absolutely crucial for employability.
And I think the more we're a global community, the more that's happening across not just small communities like colleagues, but across the world even. So we have to be able to communicate clearly and in different ways.
Yeah.
And religious studies picks up a really diverse range of skills.
I think so. I mean, everything from all kinds of skills are useful for picking up the different senses involved in doing religion, different ways of researching, so dealing with historical texts, dealing with contemporary experience and practice, I mean, a vast range really. Talk about interdisciplinarity. I think we are fundamentally interdisciplinary. We've always brought in ways of approaching the past, the present, and perhaps because religions often imagine the future, at least, have anticipations and hopes for what they want, we too need to think about understanding how those futures might evolve from the present moment onwards. So learning skills to try and engage with those things. Reflexive skills, I mean, thinking about your own understanding, your own perceptions and obsessions, and how they might create bridges, but they might also be barriers to your understanding of other people. So being reflexive about what you assume other people are doing, taking a step back and thinking differently, looking, asking, and so on, are very important.
And that's a really nice note to end on, I think, because one of the things, even though many of these discipline areas, have been very different in the past and probably will look in a very different space in the future as well, one thing that does unite arts and social sciences is this reflexivity and this, always being mindful of things that have happened in the past, what's working well. It's something we encourage our students to do.
Very much so. I think with music, there's also a physical thing about playing. We do this with our level 3 students on the Trinity Laban collaboration. We ask them to reflect about what they've done and how they do it. So it's not just what they've learned, but how they have processed it, how they've been working with other people. So it's a whole different range of reflexive things that come in there. And it's so important for learning about not just our own disciplines, but the skills of other disciplines as well.
I think that go back to the question a little while ago about the big problems of our time, such as climate change. In order to do something about climate change, we need to be able to understand why people do what they do and why it's very difficult for them to change and why they can't see alternatives to the way they live now. So that sense of understanding ourselves and what we do and trying to understand other people is absolutely crucial to that process.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been a really useful session of a range of various different disciplines. So Graham, George and Naomi, thank you so much for joining me today to fill us in on that. And I hope you've enjoyed that programme. We're going to play you some videos now. We're going to have an introduction to D100 and also BBC Ideas, the university that sparked an education revolution. And then we'll be back with Jess and Sophie to talk about Digital Turn. See you in a minute.